Senator Ron Johnson. Senator Johnson, it's a pleasure, as always. Welcome back to Freedom Watch.
Hello, Judge. Thanks for having me on.
Senator, are we going to see another continuing resolution-like piece of legislation out of the Congress, a short-term increase in the debt ceiling for only a small amount of time, basically reserving for another day the profound debate about debt and inflation?
Well, Judge, I hope not. I mean, I wish this president would get serious about addressing the fiscal crisis facing this nation, about the bankrupting of America. But so far, I have not seen evidence of that. I mean, a couple weeks ago, I said he's just phoning it in. I mean, he's sending his vice president out to do the negotiating, which is unbelievable to me. I mean, the job of President of the United States is to lead, and he's not leading on this issue. And we do need real structural reform because we're facing bankruptcy.
Well, when you use that phrase, phoning it in, I think you probably know it was felt all around the country. And what did the president do, Senator Johnson, in response to your phrase, he's just phoning it in? He played golf with the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and there was no press there. Typically, there isn't press on the golf course. We don't know what they discussed. And he dispatched Joe Biden to have just more and more meetings. Here's my fear. My fear is that the Republicans may be worn down by the president's silence and Vice President Biden's affability, and they may cave on some of this. I don't think Ron Johnson caves. I don't think Rand Paul caves, but I think some of your colleagues might. What do you think?
Well, certainly that's the reason they're slow walking this, is they want to bring us up to that deadline and then force us to increase the debt ceiling. But, Judge, that's why I wrote a piece in the Daily Caller earlier today where I laid out, how we could operate under a debt ceiling budget. And that's what we're talking about. If we refuse to increase that debt ceiling, what does that mean? It would mean we would have to live within our means. I mean, what a concept, huh? And what would our means be? According to President Obama's own budget, we will be getting in $2.6 trillion worth of revenue next year. Now, just to put that in context, that compares to 10 years ago under Bill Clinton. Remember when everything was rosy?
Right.
We spent $1.8 trillion. So if we didn't increase the debt ceiling, we would still be operating a budget that's $800 billion more than the entire federal government spent just 2 years ago or 10 years ago. Now, that pays for 100% of interest, which is $256 billion.
Right.
It pays for 100% of Social Security at $760 and still leaves $1.6 trillion to pay for essential defense, security, health and safety spending, and that's only $200 billion less than we spent 10 years ago. So I think it's important to actually look at numbers, actually take a look at what the real situation is, and not be afraid of it, because it's fear that would force us not to actually put in those structural reforms and just cave into the president.
Right, Senator, I know that this is your first term in office, and this is your first year of your first term. Were you surprised when you got to Washington and you found out that you, a successful businessman, the voters in Wisconsin, hardworking people, live within their means, don't spend more than they take in, and to the government, to the people that run the government, that's a joke. They couldn't even imagine themselves living the way the rest of us do. Were you surprised to see that?
No, I wasn't surprised. This is why I ran, Judge. I mean, I'm an accountant. I mean, I could see we were bankrupting this nation. I'll tell you what does not necessarily surprise me, but disappoint me. You mentioned earlier the lack of leadership by this president. He's played 72 rounds of golf. I just read a report. He is holding his 30th fundraiser. President Bush at the same time in his presidency had held 3 fundraisers. So that's my concern, is this president is doing nothing more than trying to raise $1 billion to be reelected. And that's what I don't quite understand, is why would you even want to be president if you're not willing to lead? And our country hungers for leadership. We need it.
Were you surprised or disappointed to learn that the president rejected the advice of the lawyers in the Justice Department and rejected the advice of the lawyers in the Defense Department, who told him that he can't start a war on his own, that he's engaged in hostilities in Libya, that under the War Powers Act he has to stop after the 60th day or ask Congress for permission to continue, and that he shopped around until he found lawyers who would agree with him, and he did, and they told him he could do whatever he wanted? Did that surprise you?
It doesn't surprise me. It's very hypocritical, but the real mistake that was made is in not asking and trying to obtain the approval of the American people through Congress. I mean, that's what he should have done before anything was done in Libya, is come to Congress. That's how you get the approval of the American public before you commit the finest among us. You know, our fine young men and women to any type of battle. The president owes it to the American people to lay out the case and convince us through Congress that this is the right course of action. And he didn't do that. He had time to consult the UN, he had time to consult the Arab League, but he never consulted with Congress, and that's very disappointing.
Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, Judge.